Hey, what's up, Famcast? Welcome to another Famcast episode. Today we bring you episode 10. Today we'll be talking about crisis intervention. We'll be talking about what are ways we can respond to crisis, and ways where in case we find ourselves in a crisis, and ways we can find skills to cope with certain crisis, and basically, yeah, just help us out through any crisis that we're experiencing, or any neighbor or friend or family member that's experiencing. We want to create this platform where we know people are aware. Me and my cousin were talking about earlier that this is a topic we hardly ever touch upon. A lot of people don't know about coping skills, and just things that fall along those parts of any crisis. Maybe we know who a survivor is, and we didn't know how to help them cope with a certain situation. And that's why we have my cousin Nano here. He's very knowledgeable in this subject. He's experienced it, helping others, helping survivors, finding coping skills. Is there something you want to touch upon before we get into deeper to this conversation and crisis intervention?
Yeah, for sure. Just a trigger warning, of course. We're going to be talking about experiencing trauma and what the different types of traumas we can experience, the complexity behind experiencing multiple traumas in one event, and more importantly, ways to discuss coping skills. So if you feel like this might not be a podcast you want to listen to, that's okay. You're more than welcome to listen to many of our other podcasts, and know that we stand with you in making that decision. And more importantly, know that your truth is your truth. I am wearing the shirt today. It's Your Voice Has Power. It's a Sexual Assault Awareness Month shirt, and interestingly enough, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month as well. And so we want to talk about how we as individuals, when it comes to this topic, we might not know what to say, how to respond, how to even bring it up, and that's okay. Validate that as humans. Whenever we have experience that are uncomfortable, it's going to be uncomfortable to talk about them, but know that we want to provide a platform, a safe space, a safe platform, and a safe place for folks to have the conversation that's something that they're ready to have, and really to erase the stigma behind it, erase the stigma behind being a survivor, and knowing that something that we should be ashamed of. No, that's not what this conversation is about. It's to empower individuals, empower all of us by providing knowledge, information, and really some interesting experiences that truly show that the world is changing and that the world is wanting to be better, and we just have to support each other in becoming better as we grow.
See, right on. So another thing too, you were saying how survivors, we were talking about how we're creating this, like making it like a movement, basically, just so even for survivors that feel that after they overcame a certain crisis in their life, so they won't feel them by themselves. Because I feel like after, for example, if you wanna go talk to a survivor, and then after you help them cope with certain crisis, how do they feel after when you leave? Do they feel alone again, or so that's why I feel like they can always come back to this YouTube channel, and listen to this certain podcast, this certain episode, so that they can know, like, hey, these guys are trying to reach out to everyone else, teach them ways in not only helping a survivor, but someone who may be a victim sometime, because they don't know how can I say, just basically to prevent this from happening to anyone. So basically becoming making this more aware for everyone. Just so but I don't know. What do you think about that? You think this can become a movement for survivors and people that are trying to help out anyone and everyone? What do you think, Nano?
I think that the movement existed and that it's time. I think one of the things that we're doing is we're we're joining a movement is what we're doing. Okay. We're joining a movement that's already existed. Voices that have come before us, who brave voices that have come before us that have used their voice and might not be with us today because they used their voice. And so I think it's important to recognize that there's not something that we're starting here. It's something that we're continuing on. And I think that being males and doing it is what is, I think, makes me very proud of in terms of being able to do this, because we're joining a movement by women that have already put forth the work, put forth the grassroots movement part of everything that we're doing, and have really laid out the foundation for even us to be able to speak about this and for us to do it in a platform like YouTube, like with our podcast, within our podcast. I think it's important to recognize how we're standing in solidarity with individuals that have already been doing this work and doing this what's the word I'm looking for, have continued marching and continued using their voice and stand in their truth and use their experiences as gateway for individuals who don't know that they have a voice yet, don't recognize that they have a voice yet, or their voices are being silenced.
All right. So I wanted to ask: is there any signs that a victim can, or a survivor, a survivor can basically signal out, and you automatically know, like, hey, this is a survivor. She or he needs my help. Is there anything
for me, do I have like a sixth sense almost? Like,
yeah,
can
like
I
a
see
sense.
an individual? I've always felt very empathetic. I've always felt like a very intuitive and empathetic person, but I don't think that I can necessarily call people out or kind of like say like, oh, this individual. One thing that I can say, I can generalize and say that I can tell when an individual might have or may have experienced trauma. And that's simply because I think can be intuitive and see signs, but I think I read a lot of body language as well, or listen to like the words that the individual's using. So if they're using like a lot of shame language, then I understand that there's something they might be going through, or they're hearing this narrative about themselves, and so when we hear that, we say it, and it's in what we say. So like a lot of times, I truly believe when we judge others, it's because it's how we perceive ourselves. So if we judge somebody for whatever it is that we might be judging them for, it's just our own battles within our own selves, but we need to project them onto other folks because we don't feel safe when we do it to ourselves, and it's a sense of control. But I think that to say that I can see an individual and say, oh, this is a survivor of a suicide or a survivor of domestic violence, I can't do that. But I can definitely say, like, oh, this individual may have struggled in the past, and I think in those moments I find myself being more of that listener versus the talker, and then just trying to see if, and I don't make it my goal either. I want to clarify, I don't make it my goal to try to help people. I think that I find myself in situations where I know that I can help, and then that just it manifests in a different light versus like that individual will simply share. I find myself in situations where people just will open up to me, and I'll say like, oh wow, like thank you for sharing that with me, and I validate that you felt this way, and I think that it's that I pointed this person out, I genuinely believe the universe brought us together so that I can be a listening ear and they can start either a healing process or continue a healing process or really get the truth out, because it's important for us. It's important for us to be heard when we're speaking our truth.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything you you want to say? You want to get out there in this podcast, like a for sure thing you want to talk about, just so that it helps the viewers, myself, and anyone else. I mean, I know there's a lot of things, but what's
There's so many things.
yeah.
So many things. I think one of the things that I really well, if you know me, you know that I love talking about emotions. I love talking about your own emotions and knowing your emotions. So like me, for example, I might feel anxious because I might be going through things in my life that are where me and my buddy anxious are going to hang out more these days than not. And I think that's people don't recognize that you benefit from befriending your emotions. You benefit from befriending your emotions because you're befriending a part of yourself, not the part of yourself that makes you who you are. Like me, I don't identify as anxious. My name is not anxious. My name is Reyes. I become anxious sometimes. Reyes and anxious hang out, but it's because anxious is related to scared. They're cousins, and scared is a present emotion. That when we think futuristically in that thought process, you become anxious because that's what anxious is. It's something that is futuristic, and it's not something that's happening present, other than the thought process that what's going to happen here, what's going to happen there. That emotion, when you befriend it, you learn that it's your messenger for a future 911 call that you want to actually probably avoid, or you don't want to feel how you felt in the past. You're anxious when your worry is your emotion when you're scared and you're worried about something that happened in the past. That's worry. And so that's when you learn to befriend your emotions, you learn to befriend them in such a way that you start recognizing what you can do in that very moment to become present again. So when you're feeling anxious, you know that there's an emotion happening there. You might be scared, and oftentimes our body, when we're becoming scared, it shuts down our lungs. And the reason why it's important to recognize that is because when you're not taking oxygen into your body itself, your thoughts itself start swirling. You start thinking about all these different things, and that's your anxious. You're anxious because you're scared because you're not breathing, and your body now become anxious because it's trying to get some oxygen. So it's trying to get you to think about things so that you can do what? So that now you start moving from your stem part of your brain, your fear response, to your prefrontal cortex, so that you can start making decisions on these things that you're thinking about. And a lot of times that it's your emotion that befriends you. So another example is like anger. Nobody likes to feel angry, or people love to feel angry. Sometimes there's no in between. But the reality is that your message when you're angry is change. Changing your perspective, changing relationships, changing jobs, changing situations, changing your setting, changing the way you respond to anger simply is that message. And when we can befriend the emotion, you learn that anger is not destructive. Anger likes to change. Anger doesn't like to see buildings fall down. Anger likes to take them down one by one floor at a time. And anger, more importantly, likes to see change because it doesn't want to be here in this present, in this moment all the time. So you yourself, when you recognize that your message of anger is to change, you actually get to befriend the emotion, and you've changed the way you respond to anger. So now you're not going to be destructive, you're going to be loving. You're not going to yell at someone to get their attention or to get them to do something. You're going to talk to them. You're going to use your big voice, use your words, and communicate to them what it is you need, so that your level of anger isn't, and you don't become the emotion. I think that's the most important thing, is not becoming the emotion, but knowing that if you do become the emotion, that's because you're human. And that these little microaggressions have escalated into such a volume that now but you're not angry. Your name is not angry. Your name doesn't change. You don't become the Hulk. No, you yourself befriended anger, and now you and anger are hanging out real tight.
Yeah.
And when you understand that, when you befriend it, you value it, you can actually start asking yourself, well, why am I angry? Why am I scared? Why am I sad? Any emotion is always going to be linked to your values. When you link your emotions to your values, it understands, and you start validating yourself why you feel the way you felt. I'm angry because I really tried to communicate to this individual that they weren't supposed to touch the hot pot, and they went and touched the hot pot. So now you have to recognize that it's not angry. You're not angry. You're frustrated. You're frustrated because there was nothing you could have done to stop this individual from touching the hot pot. You told them, you shared with them, you told them that even you touched the hot pot and it burned you, but that did not stop them. So you have to understand the difference between being angry and being frustrated. You're angry that this person is now burned, but you're frustrated because you couldn't stop this individual from burning themselves in the first place. And then you start actually addressing autonomy in such a really, really well way. And the reason why I love emotions, and I want to get this across in this podcast, is because your emotions are your autonomy. Your autonomy is your ability to be who you are because you decide, not because someone is coercing you, someone is manipulating you to be who you are. No. It's not your parent saying you can't cry, even though you know that you're sad and that's the only way to express that. Not even your parent knows you better than you know yourself. So your emotion is your autonomy, and your autonomy is what's going to keep you safe. When you recognize that you are scared because there is a 911 call, your body is your only way to send the message of 911 to itself is by being scared. So it starts racing that heart, and it starts sending blood throughout your body, and then you're ready, and that blood is being pumped through the chemical of adrenaline and cortisol. So it's that fight or flight or freeze response that you just don't know what to do. And a lot of times when we spawn from our prefrontal cortex, when we respond from our stem brain, that fear response, we have limited skills. We don't know that we can talk to someone, or we don't know that we are actually not alone in this. It's until we move from our stem brain to our prefrontal cortex, and the only way to do that is by taking deep breaths so that you move the oxygen in your brain from your stem brain to your prefrontal cortex. That's this part right here. And that in those parts, when you're angry, I don't know if you've ever been in situations with your mom, primo, but where she's so angry and she's about to do something to you, and you think, oh my God, I am about to piss this lady off. And she actually does the most calmest thing. And she te regaña con palabras, no te regaña con la chancla o el cinto o el X, no, te da un consejo que nunca se te va a olvidar. That's your parent using their prefrontal cortex and knowing that, I'm angry. But if I want my child to change right now, I have to respond in the most productive way possible. And yelling at a child is not the productive thing to do. Talking to the child, giving them those pieces of wisdom, and it's why when a parent tells you, "I'm not angry at you, I'm disappointed," because angry, they're not angry at the child. They're disappointed in themselves for not being able to get you to do that thing that they didn't want you to do, or for you not passing that test, or whatever it might be. It's something that they couldn't do, and that's why it hurts us.
Yeah.
It starts then too. Yeah. So then it moves up. So, but what are you gonna say?
How you're saying how when a parent's mad at you, they don't go over there and hit you. My mom never hit us, but yeah, like how you're saying, she would if we ever did anything bad, I remember walking into the door. I forget for what reason. I know I must have done something bad in school. They gave her a call, whatever, and she was already at the table at the end of the dinner table, and she was just sitting there. And when I walk in, before I walk in, I'm just like, man, my mom's gonna be mad. She's gonna hit me, or something like that. But she's never ever hit us in our life.
Yeah.
But as soon as we walk in the door, we'll see her, and she'll look at us, and she wouldn't really say anything. She'll just look down, and she'll just be like, man, like shake her head, like ah man, and we knew then, we're like, damn, we messed up, and we took that as a we responded to that, and the way I responded to that, I remember is anytime my friends would come over and be like, hey, let's go play, or right after that happened, I would be like, nah, I'm grounded. Like I would ground myself.
Like, you got yourself.
Yeah, I'm like
that's good discipline.
Yeah, I'm like, nah, I'm grounded. But my mom never did anything. But there was ways that she there, like how you're saying, there's ways to teach other people rather than hitting them. Causing any type of trauma to them, because that you ain't gonna learn. That eventually is gonna push them away from you, rather than teach them what's right from wrong and stuff like that.
You
Yeah.
you hit a child, you teach them that it's okay for them to be hit, and for them eventually to hurt another individual.
Person, yeah.
And that's not the message. Discipline is not to hit. Discipline means to teach.
Mm-hmm.
Reframe the idea of discipline as to punish. Discipline does not mean punish. Discipline means to teach. And we need to discipline children. We need to discipline us as adults first, though. We have to learn how to discipline ourselves, because the way we were disciplined was by shame, by that traditional form of discipline, which was to punish. But we're not that society anymore. It's why I say we're not reptilian. We don't need to use the part of our reptilia anymore. We're safe. Recognize that you're safe. Recognize that you're speaking to a child, and the goal of the child is not to hurt you. And if the child has the goal to hurt you, you have to ask yourself, where did this child learn this goal? Don't shame the child for knowing information and knowing things that you believe as an adult they should not know. Because ask yourself, where did they learn this? Yeah. You ask yourself, where did they learn this? You ask a lot more of a prosperous question, and you might actually save a child. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where a lot of at my last job, like I said, I was a sexual assault advocate for survivors of sexual assault and significant others. And the majority of the clients that we saw were not people who had just experienced this assault. Yes, we saw those people, but the majority of our clients were adults who were molested as children. These are adults that are in their 40s and their 50s and their 60s, already well in their adulthood, suffering from trauma that they experienced before they were 18. Wow. So these individuals have coping skills and a structured mindset that life circumstances, if they believe that they deserve to have been hurt, that's something that you have to unlearn. So today, I always say, like, teach children discipline healthy. To teach them that discipline is for them to learn, for them to grow. I'm not getting you in trouble. I'm not saying that you're not allowed to cry. I'm saying understand why you're crying. What is the value? What is it that you lost? Because when you cry, you're expressing a loss of a value. What is it that you lost? And then now you open up an opportunity for this child to even tell you who took it from them. I see that you have that something was taken from you. Well, who took this from you? And now you're not asking a shaming question to the child. You're not saying, why are you this way? You're saying, what happened? Mm-hmm. And that invites a conversation versus a defense. What did you do is a defense.
Yeah.
Why are you doing this is a defense. What happened? Tell me more about that. I see that you were out at 2 a.m. Was there anybody else with you? Because now you acknowledge that it's okay for them to be out. It's okay for them, and then maybe they have a witness, right? We reframe the question from it being shaming, and then you get a lot more information. And I think a lot of times, I think it's super important, especially for like first responders, to use language that is not gonna blame the individual when something has happened to that's not going to blame the victim, is what I'm trying to say. Because especially when it comes to survivors, if you blame them,
They're already.
They're never gonna want to tell somebody ever again because, and they're gonna have guilt that doesn't belong to them. I think that more importantly, they're gonna have guilt that doesn't belong to them, and it's gonna be so much harder to heal from that because you're gonna have to recognize how you misplaced guilt, and that's already something that I think one of the things that I learned in my training was that people, when it comes to any crime scene, not even, I'm sorry, any crime scene, there's always the scene of the crime that you can go to. So like if it's a murder, you know that if it was in a car, that's the scene of the crime. They're gonna put all of these different things, right? Evidence A, evidence B, all these numbers, all these marks. When it comes to sexual assault, the crime scene is the individual, the human body. And so we have to learn how to recognize that when it comes to empowering an individual and being a first responder, you want to do that in the most authentic way possible, in the most way that's going to respect that person and their experience and their truth. You don't want to treat them like a crime scene.
Yeah.
And so it gets tricky when that is the reality of the circumstance. But we as individuals have the right to do that and an ability to do that in the most empowering way. Mm-hmm. So like I know off camera we were talking about like mandated reporters. Mandated reporters, for me, it's interesting because I am falling into a role now where I am a mandated reporter. In my work at Rape Crisis, I was not a mandated reporter. But it's fairly simple. It's empowering an individual. Being a mandated reporter doesn't mean that you have to take someone's truth and their voice away. It means that you can actually provide them with information and resources so that they can reclaim their voice, and you're still fulfilling your duty as being a mandated reporter, getting this reported in the first place. But when it comes from that individual willingly that they're reporting because they want to report, you restore a piece of autonomy that not only belongs to them, but in that moment they might not even know they have it.
So you're saying like how basically not to blame the victim. What are some, like, I don't know if you would call them openers, but ways to speak to a victim? What are some like questions you ask? What are your go-to questions?
I try to refrain from questions or go-to questions. I try to keep it very, especially if it was in a first meeting crisis intervention, I always would want to say something like, hi, my name's Reyes. I'm sorry that we have to meet under these circumstances. I'm your client advocate. I'm here for you. Okay. What is it that you might need at this very moment? And also even just in those moments, letting them know that you're not going to have their answers. You're just simply there to support them because you know that how can I rephrase this? You know that what that individual needs in that moment is empowerment. And so you want to be able to start doing that as soon as possible. So like if you are going to ask questions, it's going to be questions that they can make decisions for in that moment. Like, would you like a water? Yes and no. Yes or no. Okay. So that now they're making decisions for themselves. And you're not going to suggest to them, hey, you might want a water. No. You're going to say, do you want a water? And then they're going to say yes, and they're going to know. And whatever it is that they say, you allow it. You let that empower that individual because that's what they need in that moment. They need to recognize that they have autonomy over themselves, and in any little way that we can do that, you want to continuously do that. Like, and then nurses are amazing at doing that. And sometimes they're not the best at doing that, and I think that's why you have things like SART teams, sexual assault response teams, that collaborate together so that you want to have the best team working together, and you're not taking anything away from the nurse, or it's because it's never about the nurse or the advocate. It's always about that individual that's going through the crisis.
All right, yeah.
And so I'm going to think of some other like key things that you could want to say. And honestly, I think one of the things too about crisis intervention is you have to be okay with silence. You have to be okay with silence because that person is processing a lot.
Oh yeah.
And the more quiet it is, sometimes it helps. And of course, a distraction here and there doesn't. But you don't know that they need the distraction. Only they will know. And you
so
like anything.
So,
let them navigate their truths. Go ahead.
oh no, no, finish, bro. Finish.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say let them navigate their truth, their
Okay,
journey.
okay, yeah. So yeah, I was gonna ask like, so when when you're trying to speak to a survivor and like how you're saying there's silence in the room, um, what do you do then? Do you just let him or her open up when they're ready, or like I know you were saying it earlier just now, but or what in your role, what do you do?
In my role, I sit in silence with
Sit in
them.
silence with them.
Um,
Okay.
I sit in silence with them. I let them process it, process what they're going through, and every person and every individual I've ever worked with has been different, which is I think is is validating to the experience because it is their own experience. But even when I can even pull myself out of my role as being a sexual assault counselor, being there for friends, being there for family members, like finding myself in those roles and knowing that being there, not having to be the person to say the right thing or putting the pressure on myself to feel like I even have the right thing to say because you don't. You have to be okay with the fact that you don't have anything to say. And that's what's supposed to happen because that's more validating to the person because it's validating that what happened to them was not supposed to happen in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
I oftentimes say anytime we try to make sense of something that wasn't supposed to make sense in the first place, we're validating that it happened, and so we don't want to do that, especially when it comes to taking someone's autonomy away. We don't want to do that to people, and so when we do that to people, we have to recognize that that's not something that we want to make sense of. Because if we try to make sense of it, like I said, we're validating the experience and the behavior, and we're not supposed to tolerate it. It shouldn't happen. And when you find yourself in moments of comforting someone that is going through something that wasn't supposed to happen, saying nothing is sometimes the best thing to do. Being silent, or I know that when I was going through grief and people would say sorry to me, I hated that. I hated them saying sorry because I don't understand why they're sorry, and it's because I'm not in a space to be able to recognize that. So don't put me in the situation in a space that I am not ready to be in, but also me myself as an individual, I'm not going to lash out at each person that's saying sorry to me. I'm going to recognize that they don't know what to say. They don't have the words to say, and I understand that I can understand, and so I'm not going to respond harshly. And I've seen the opposite, where people can respond very negatively or respond in a way that is more emotional than I guess more emotional than not emotional. But we always respond emotionally, but we're without our buddy calm, because we can respond with our buddy calm anytime, whether we're happy, sad, angry. We always want to respond from our buddy calm, because there we know that we're breathing, we're using clarity, and we're using our body to create that clarity. So the endorphins running through your body are actually healing, versus even when you're angry, there's that adrenaline running through your body. It's not healthy for your heart specifically. It can lead, especially if you're over the age of 65 and you had microaggressions happen throughout your life every single day, your chances of cardiac arrest are
Cardiac. Yeah. Cardiac
and cardiac arrest. All it takes is that one thing that really wasn't that big a deal, that we made it into a big deal, and it's our heart, and that's the reality of it. Is it's still your body, and sometimes people will hold on to grudges, and I say, don't do that, because you're only holding that in your heart. It's not someone else's heart that you're hurting. You're hurting your own heart. So the message of anger, change. Change the relationship, change the perspective, change your behavior, because change the way you respond to anger, because your heart could only take so much. And that's just the truth. If it's scared, an emotion that a bodily response from constant fear is the increased amount of cortisol that's being released through your body. That cortisol deteriorates your bones. It deteriorates your organs, and so or if you have complex emotional stuff, for example, if you're an individual that might have anxiety, might suffer from chronic anxiety and depression, and then you have that individual engage in substance abuse, that's a very malnourished liver that we're talking about. And that malnourished liver is going to lead to other health problems and other effects. And so I think when it comes to understanding the effects of trauma, it's so important to know your emotion, the way your body responds to your emotions, and how you yourself can understand that although we cannot control our emotions, we can learn to adapt to them. We can learn to change the way we respond to them, and more importantly, we can choose to befriend them versus hate being angry, hate feeling happy, hate feeling sad, hate feeling scared. Like, when you hate something, you foster negative energy. When you embrace something, when you befriend it, you use your spirit of love. And when you use the spirit of love, you're creating oxytocin that's used to heal your body. It's creating serotonin to heal your body. And healing chemicals is what we want. We don't want high dosages of cortisol every single day. We want dosages of oxytocin, serotonin, even dopamine sometimes can be too much dopamine because it triggers our reward system. So you have to navigate what is going to trigger your reward system. Making someone feel bad is not something that needs to be triggering your reward system. Yet people who are angry and value being angry sometimes might have that release of dopamine when they've told someone off or given somebody a piece of their mind, and that's it. You can see how that cycle can develop into a very unhealthy one. A cycle of violence is what I call. But yeah, it's using your emotions to navigate how you're going to cope through trauma is super, super beneficial, and recognizing what your triggers are. When you can recognize what your triggers are, what's whether it's a smell, whether it's a color. At my last job, we weren't allowed to wear brands because brands were triggering for some folks, and so and that was the first time in my life where I worked in a place where we weren't allowed to wear specific brands, and I never cared for brands to begin with, but it actually gave me a really validating reason as to why I don't have to choose. I don't have to wear the Nike or the Abercrombie or Aeropostale. No, those brands don't matter, because for an individual, especially when you're doing crisis intervention, having brands is not something that you want to go into an ER room with, because you don't know what this person just went through and what they saw and what's going to actually help them remember and what's going to suppress their memory in the first place. And we don't want to suppress people's emotions when they're going through trauma.
Yeah. So you're also saying like there's words like how you're saying when you've experienced sadness and like sadness, and someone said sorry to you, and you were saying why are you sorry, so my question is, what are other words that we can prevent saying so that we won't have an individual feel like that, like how you were saying when someone's
never tell somebody how to express their emotion. I think that's number one. Never tell somebody how to feel when they're going through something. Never tell somebody, and it just comes. I think that's why I think it's important to talk about autonomy, because autonomy is your right to express how you feel. It's your right to cry when you're sad, or cry when you're happy, or cry when you're angry, or cry when you're scared. And every individual is gonna respond to their emotion differently. And so when you tell somebody don't cry. You're a little boy. Don't cry. You're telling them how to feel.
Yeah.
And you're telling them how not to feel. And you're also, in that scenario, you're telling them how genders are supposed to feel. And so you coerce this individual to be a bully, because now when they see another person cry, what are they going to say? Oh, you little girl, why are you crying, little girl? It's right. So it's like you want to actually do it in a way that's going to be helpful and invite the emotion.
Okay.
Validate the experience. So don't tell a person how to feel, or like I oftentimes run into the mistake of saying, hey, take a deep breath. Hey, let's remember to breathe. And that's not always okay, because especially when a person's angry, they don't want to breathe. Their body already, like, again, the message is changed. They want to see whatever it is that they're seeing broken, not broken, or they want to, I don't know, I'm trying to think of scenarios of being angry. They want the person who just honked at them to get a piece of their mind. Like, I'm going to honk at that back, or, that emotion, but change itself, I mean, maybe change your perspective. Maybe this person is in a rush, or maybe they didn't see you, or maybe they were the person that you cut off yesterday, and now you're both in this, like, back and forth, cutting each other off every other day. So it's, you want to relook at it, situations, and then that starts with you, the individual. So if you see somebody, here's a scenario that I got from the book Dr. Becky Bailey, Managing Emotional Mayhem, for anger specifically. When you're at a grocery store and you're at a grocery store and there's a child in the car crying and screaming and being very frustrated and showing and expressing frustration, and you might see the parent who's ignoring the child, neglecting the child. In that moment, you might become angry because there's a screaming child in the store. You might become angry because the parent's neglecting the screaming child on the floor. And then what are you going to do to respond? Are you going to judge the parent for ignoring the child? Are you going to walk by the child and give him a dirty face so he can shut up? Or are you going to stick your tongue out at the child? Or maybe even in that moment, are you going to go up to the child and say, hey, what do you need, child? Why are you screaming? Whatever it is, however you choose to respond is your autonomy. You have the ability to respond in a wish you well. Create positive energy for that moment, because that's what that moment really needs. It needs positive energy. Maybe if you are the person to say, hey, child, what's going on? Maybe that parent might recognize that they're so focused on what to get for dinner that they forgot that their child's actually trying to get dinner in this very moment, or whatever it is that is going on, right? Shifting your perspective gives you so much room to see things and use your experiences in a way that you choose. Not in the way that anybody else gets to see it from the perspective that they want to see it, but in the way that you choose to see it. It's almost, I know when we were talking during the dreams episode, you were talking about how you like your dreams because it's your own movie. It's like, nobody is going to see it, no one's going to, it's just how you get to respond to it. And I think that our emotions are very much that, and how we respond to our emotions is our own movie. So we can't control, I've learned that I can't control when I'm angry. And so now, instead of trying to control when I'm angry, I try to control my environment. I try to say, you know what, I don't belong here. I can choose to leave right now. Or simply say, you know what, like, I've had my wallet stolen, and I thought to myself, okay, I can either be angry about my wallet being stolen, or I can choose to change the way this person obviously needs this money more than I need it. My money. And that saved me, because it saved the relationship. It saved me from doing something that I knew I was going to hate myself for doing later if I had done it. And it actually made me into a bigger person, simply because I recognize that when I work, it's not just for me, it's for others around me. And I like to think of myself as a giving person, and so I'm not going to think twice about money being missing. I'm going to make sure and know that, you know what, this person needs money, and what I'm going to do now is make sure, hey, do you need more? Is there anything else you need? Is there anything else I can do to help you? Because I see that you're struggling. And that makes, I think, especially when it comes to working with trauma, people who are experiencing trauma, I don't see them for their trauma. I don't see them for
Yeah.
for the, you know, when I would work with client, I knew that I was recognizing more of a person. This is a person that, like I said, I'm sorry that we have to meet under these circumstances. My name is Reyes. What is it I can do to support you today? Is there anything I can do to support you? So if there's nothing I can do to support you, I'm going to go ahead and just linger here. If you need anything, I'm right here. I can be inside of the door, outside the door, whatever you like me to do. Would you like for me to be inside or outside? And then if you get to decide, you know, inside or outside. Me not talking after that gives them the cue that now they can make a decision for themselves. And now they're making a decision for themselves about who they want around them. Mm. And that's beauty when it comes to something like when working in crisis intervention, because who you want around you in the middle of your crisis, you have to be able to be the person to decide that. Yeah. You have to. If you can't decide that you don't want the police officer in there, well, you're not going to cooperate with the police officer. So you want to cooperate with the individual, and I think the only way to cooperate with anybody is by humanizing them, not seeing them as like a victim or a survivor, but like earlier you asked me, like, what's the best way to call somebody? Call them by their name. Mm-hmm. Call them by their name. You know before you respond what the person's name is, and if you don't know their name, what do you do in a situation when you're with somebody and you don't know who they are? You introduce yourself, or you ask them for your name. And that anytime you ask somebody like me, hey, what's your name? What's your name?
Christian.
So I get you had to take a moment to reflect about yourself.
Yeah.
Now the conversation is about you, not about me. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to working with clients that are experiencing trauma, you want to reshift it back to them. They need to be the narrative of their journey. They need to be the teller of story of their experience, because when they get to do it, their brain heals from that, and their body begins to heal from that, and that's the goal. The goal is for them to heal, not for me to heal. The goal is for them to do something good for themselves, not for me to do something good for somebody else. The goal is simply my goal is to be present. And in the present, like I've talked about before, the present isn't something we have to be scared of. Scared is what happens during our present, and we want to open that up. It's a gift. And we want to hear the message, and we want to, and because when we do that, you learn that when you had that fear and that feeling in your gut that told you might be in an uncomfortable situation, you learn to listen to that voice. And that's the voice you want to listen to, the voice of reason. The voice that wants to keep yourself safe and for you to stay safe. You don't want to listen to the voice that keeps you in risky situations. Because the voice that keeps you in risky situations is not your voice. Mm-hmm. That's the voice of someone else. Yeah. It's a voice of somebody that has misled you, that has maybe lied to you or coerced you for their own benefit.
So you're also talking about how when a police officer's inside is in a room with the survivor, have you what are some questions they've asked, and do you think it's the right questions to ask, or is it like or what's your role? Are you in the room with them at the same time?
Ideally, yes. Ideally, I'm in the room with the I should say was, because I don't work for the agency anymore. But ideally, I was in the room with the survivor, the law enforcement, and the nurse, and my role was to advocate for them. So, and I did that for the most part. Like when a law enforcement officer would say inappropriate comments, like, why were you out late at night? I would always intervene and say, that's not what we're here to talk about. Or I a lot of times was after, like, you'll say something like, can I speak to you one-on-one, please? and then you have that conversation, and they're not. I've always had a very comfortable relationship with law enforcement, so that part of my role was always a lot more difficult. But I learned to overcome because you have to speak up for an individual who just because they were out late at night doesn't mean that they themselves wanted to be in an unsafe situation. We don't do that as our bodies don't even let us do that. So to ask the question is to ask. There's other questions you can ask, like I had said, were you with anybody else? Did anybody else join you? Because now you're asking more a question that's going to bring you information, like a witness. Now you might have a witness, and that's going to be a lot more beneficial than why were you out late at night? Yeah. Like that question doesn't answer anything. The answer to that question is not going to answer anything, and it puts the responsibility for the attack and the crime on the individual victim.
It kind of makes it seem like it was their fault when being asked that.
And we know that the fault falls on the perpetrator.
Exactly.
There's nothing when somebody wants to hurt you, there's nothing you can do to prevent that from happening. Absolutely nothing, because that person has already made it their goal to hurt you. And so the reason why we really want to not victim blame is because when it comes to guilt is actually a very healthy emotion that we feel when our moral compass is off. When our moral compass is off is because I did something that now I feel guilty. My friend called me and I didn't answer, so I might feel a little bit guilty for not answering the phone call. Well, I was busy, so we're going to shift that. Well, now I talked to my friend and they yelled at me because I didn't answer the phone call. I feel guilty. I feel bad now. Well, now you're holding somebody else's guilt, because you're holding your guilt and you're holding the guilt of your friend for hurting you. And you shouldn't hold your friend's guilt for hurting you. Your friend should hold themselves accountable for yelling at you, because you didn't deserve to be yelled at in the first place just because you didn't answer someone's call. Actually, more importantly, that your friend needs to understand that maybe you didn't answer your call, the phone, because you were in the middle of something. Exactly. There was something going on. Maybe you weren't ready. So your friend yelling at you, you don't want to hold two people's guilt. You only want to hold your guilt. And so a lot of times survivors oftentimes are forced to hold perpetrators' guilt because of the stigma that comes with being a survivor, and the misinformation and the constant blaming of a person who had nothing to do with the crime that happened to them. And I think as a society, we can shift the way we navigate our language to not blame the victim, to really hold the perpetrator accountable to their actions, because their actions are unjustifiable in a court of law. I think, with that being said, I think that was one of the most difficult parts of doing client advocacy work, is that you don't see the justice you want to see, because a lot of these assaults aren't being reported, or when they are being reported, they're not. There's not either enough evidence, or a jury. What are they called? A district attorney finds that there's just not enough evidence and doesn't want to pursue the case, and that's very frustrating, because you can have all of your ducks lined up in a row and not have that one person who can make a huge decision on whether we're going to get this perpetrator off the street or not, and they fall through, and that gets very difficult, because like you said, you did everything correct, and oftentimes you see that happen a lot, especially when it comes to these cases. I mean, just to talk about men alone, men don't report their assaults. So these perpetrators are out in the streets and constantly hurting other individuals and finding new victims. And because there's such a stigma on men and sexual assault, and whether they can be sexually assaulted or not, or all these other stigmas or ideologies that really shame men for standing in their truth when it comes to them being sexually assaulted, our society really needs to shift that. And that's just an example of why people don't report in the first place, because there's stigma, there's shame, and I think that's one of the reasons why I really want to have this platform on this channel, because we have to shift that narrative. There shouldn't be shame towards the survivor. There shouldn't be an expectation even for survivors. There should be expectations for perpetrators. I know many moons back, I did an interview with Radio and Chico, and one of the politicians that was running for something was being accused of being sexually assaulted, and one of the interviewers who was interviewing this politician asked, are there going to be any more survivors coming out and speaking forward saying that you hurt them? And I remember just being like, see, that's the issue, the question in itself. As the person asking the question, you're putting the responsibility on survivors to come out and speak forward to their truth, when what really should be happening is the question should have been phrased as, have you hurt more people? Has there been, of the people that have come out, have you hurt more people? More than, with the experience that this person is claiming to have more people have had similar experience? Have we done that with more individuals? Because now you're holding the perpetrator accountable, the individual accountable to their actions, to what they've done, and you relieve that guilt on the survivor, that they're supposed to be the one to speak forward and come out, when you don't even have the support for them to be able to do that, because we're so busy trying to protect the perpetrator with our questions that don't even ask the better appropriate questions. Like I said, like, have you hurt somebody else? Have you had similar encounters? Because that puts them in the spot, in their truth. It stands them in their truth, and now they have to speak on the things that they've done, and not the survivor on the things that they could have done differently or shouldn't have done, whatever it is. No, like that goes. Like I think the last thing that I'll vent about, if I no, you know what? I'm gonna rephrase that, because I'm not venting. I'm speaking truth. The last thing it's the whole idea of like people, like what a person was wearing during their assault. There's a program that is brought on through many different type of organizations and groups, and the program itself is a display of what I was wearing. I think it's what it's called, what I was wearing, or something like that, along the lines of what that individual was wearing at the moment of their assault. Because oftentimes, especially during it's why we celebrate Denim Day, actually, because we oftentimes would blame, if the person was wearing jeans, that they were asking for it. If they're wearing skirts, they were asking for it. Well, the reality is that clothes does not mean anything. It doesn't stand for consent in any way whatsoever. Yeah. And so in some of these events, you'll see you'll see displays of pajamas, or you'll see displays of nightgowns. So it really speaks to the reality that clothes has nothing to do with the person being sexually assaulted or asking to be sexually assaulted. Absolutely whatsoever. Nobody asks to be sexually assaulted, because therefore it doesn't constitute as a sexual assault. So really identifying that your consent is not determined by your clothes. Your consent is not determined by your bodily behavior. Your consent is determined by you, the individual, giving and affirming that consent, and no one can make that decision for you. And in moments where you don't feel comfortable, know that you have the right to speak up. You have the right to do what you feel is best for you to do to feel safe and to be safe, and know that there's going to be individuals out there that are going to support you, that are going to stand with you, and stand with you in solidarity, but more importantly, stand with you in the struggle for a fight that it needs to end. And I think the more we have these conversations, yes, we'll get there, but we need to have more, and we need to recognize that it's a human issue, not a gender issue, that we can put an end to this, and more importantly, it takes coming together, understanding each other, and coming together.
So another thing too, does gender play a role in like in your role? Does gender play a role? For example, a woman who was who had trauma or any crisis in their life, being a male, does that does that make her feel uncomfortable? Um, or how does that does gen like what I'm asking is, does gender play any like role in, or what does gender play in a role in a survivor?
I think that so it's safe to say that that all genders experience trauma,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that women specifically are targeted, and women of color specifically are targeted even more, marginalized even more, and are more susceptible to these types of crimes. Um, but I think that being a male in this workforce has been both a good thing and an empowering thing as well. Um, because although I have experiences where people don't want to work with me because of how my gender expression, I also have individuals that, because of my chosen gender expression, they want to work with me. And so I have experiences where I've worked with men, and they don't, they're homophobic men, and they don't recognize that they're actually working with me, and that they're already challenging a mindset, but because they don't know, it makes the healing process so much more about them
Mm-hmm.
versus me, and that's what it should be about.
Nice.
And so I think that because I've been privileged enough to have that mindset to say, I'm not going to take it personal when a person doesn't want to work with me. I'm going to actually put them at the foot of their journey and say, okay, whoa, let me get you a person that's going to be able to help you.
Yeah.
Let me get you someone that's going to be able to support you in the ways that you need to be supported, and then that's it. So like I always say, like, I use my Q-tips, quit taking it personal, and I use them in the morning, I use them in the day, I use them in the night, because when a person doesn't want to work with me, it has nothing to do with me. It's all to do with them, and I think it's important for me to be able to respect that and allow for them to make that decision, and for me to be okay with that, because there's gonna be, like I said, other people that I'm doing this work in, and by me presenting who I am, I'm already changing the culture, shifting the culture in a way where I can be a male and advocate for survivors of sexual assault, regardless of whether their gender is more feminine or more masculine or more androgynous, whatever it might be. Like, I get to work with that individual, and if they don't want to work with me, that's okay. And like I said, I've had those experiences where people, I had an ER. I went into an ER one time, and the survivor did not want to see me, did not want to work with me. And so I actually just had to give them my information. So I was going to give it to the nurse so that they could pass on the information. And then they said, give me one moment. And so she went in. This nurse has already, I think I may have shared this before on the podcast as well, but this nurse has already worked with me in the past and knows the way my style is and things like that. And so she's like, give me one moment, let me go talk to them. And then they did. She talked to them, she talked to the survivor, and the survivor sent the nurse to get me so that I can just give them the information. Well, I gave them the information, and they ended up wanting me to be there throughout the whole forensic examination. And it felt cool, because I thought like I was going to be one of those experiences where it was going to be about them not wanting me there, and if I would have known, I would have sent a female to begin with, so I would have done my role a little bit differently. But it ended up working out because the nurse advocated for me in that moment, and ended up being really well, because I worked with that individual and did healing with that individual, and I was one of the first males that they've encountered that was actually safe for them since their attack. And so it's played both a really, really good role, because again, I can be that first individual that is safe, that first male that's safe, and it can be in that because I'm a male, they already see me as I'm not safe, and so they're not going to want to work with me. And for me, it's just a matter of not taking it personal and getting someone that's going to be able to help them and support them. And in that case, it will be a woman. And we had other folks that were able to attend that, to be there for them, and me moved on and did whatever it is that I was doing. But that, I think that, like, to answer your question more specifically, does it play a role? Yes, it does. but it also plays a role that doesn't have to be so negative. It can actually be like I see myself as a privileged role because I'm able to be a survivor in the sense of like a male survivor, a survivor that people see me and will not assume that I'm a survivor, and I get to be that one in six. And it's not that I feel special to be that 1 in 6. I obviously hate that I'm that 1 in 6, but it is powerful. It is powerful to be that individual because I get to represent people who might not know that they have a voice, and more importantly, might not be seen in the world when it comes to sexual assault, because it is something that more women are seen as victims and seen as that this affects them more. And I'm not going to be the person that to say yes it does and no or no it doesn't, because the statistics are statistics. Women are highly more subjected to sexual assault and sexual violence in our society than men are, but men also don't have the ability to purport their crimes, to stand in that truth and to really say, you know, this is my truth, this is what's happened to me, and it wasn't supposed to happen first place.
So you were saying, how I asked how gender plays a role, and how you were saying you've had a survivor say, no, I don't want to speak to so and so. I feel like that in the beginning of the podcast you were saying about how giving a survivor that ability of empowerment, and I feel when they say they choose like not to talk to someone, that still plays that role in empowerment, because that's giving them the choice to choose, and their, you know, like how you're trying to let them, you were saying in the beginning, get them to say what they want to say when they want to say it, because it's about them, it's not about you. So yeah, I feel like how everything you said right now was, that's still a step to empowerment for that. For
it falls in line.
Yeah.
They get to choose. They get to choose who's gonna be around them in their moment of crisis.
Exactly.
And if I'm not that person that they want, I get to respect that decision for them.
Exactly. Rather than saying like, no, I can help you and this and this and that, or yeah, you see, so that too plays, like I said, plays that part. And
plays a part, plays a role, and, and like I said, when that nurse advocated for me, it helped because that survivor, like I said, I was the first male to be safe for them, and then in other situations, I get to be the male that respects their no. I get to be the male that says that respects their lack of wanting male presence around them. And whether this is for men, women, I've had men not want me there because I'm a man, and I've had women not want me there because I'm a man. I have trans folks not want me there because I'm a man, and all I've had the other way around, where people want me there because I'm a male. People want me there because they'll think that I'm going to be strong, and I always get to remind them, this has nothing to do with me. You're the strong one.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're the one that's the brave one. You're the one that's the nice one. You're the one that's the comforting one. I'm glad you're happy you met me. I'm honored to have met you. I'm grateful to have been somebody in your life in this moment of crisis, because I feel different. I'm a better person because I met you, and that changes an individual because you're validating them. You're validating them as a human, and when they've experienced trauma, they've already feel belittled. That's already an emotion that they're processing and experiencing. That any form of positive truth that I can give them, it's not even that I can give them. Let me rephrase that. Any moment of positive truth that we can share together is a human experience that is going to only prosper them in the future, and it's going to prosper me in the future too. I went into this work, when I first went into working for Red Crisis, because one of my goals in life is to have a camp, and I know that a child one day is going to come to me and share with me an experience, and I don't want to victim blame them, I don't want to shame them, and I want to be able to support them. I thought that that's why I did this role, and now I recognize that the day a a child comes to me, of all the adults in their life, that child comes to me and chooses me to be that safeguard, now I know I'm going to do that in an empowering way, but I know that child's going to impact me for the rest of my life. And I know that although I went in there with one mission, I came out with a whole other perspective of how I'm going to be influenced for the rest of my life by these people who have had something happen to them that has been influenced them, and they're going to pass along that wisdom to me. And it's because of those individuals that I'm able to do this podcast today, because I stand in the truth of people who that either don't have a truth, or not don't have a truth. Let me rephrase that: don't have a voice, or don't recognize that they don't have a voice that they can use. I get to use that. I have that experience, and I get to do that, and I get to pave the way for people to simply know that it's okay to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's okay to talk about it, and then it doesn't have to be re-triggering, or you can embrace the trigger because you're healing.
Right on. Yeah. Another thing too, you can't take things personally, right? Especially like how you were saying, like how we were talking about your role, their decisions and stuff. So I feel like another thing too is if like for example, if I'm trying to help someone out, and they're like how they say, like how we're saying, if they say they don't want to speak to us, they don't want us to support their whatever they're going through, then us as individuals, we have to understand that we can't take it personally. It's because it's not, like how you said, it's not our choice. It's what it's them finding their comfort zone. So so don't take things personally. Yeah.
That helps us a lot, because it helps you understand, like, when a person's going through it. Like I have to admit, like, I haven't been at my 100. So am I reaching out to all my friends, my cousins, my families? Nah, like I've been more isolated than not. But I have to, the people around me, people who care about me, have to recognize that's because I do that. As a Sagittarius, I do that. It's built within me to want to isolate when you struggle, because you don't want to face the scrutiny of the struggle by other people. And so it's the same with anybody experiencing any difficult time in their life. It's hard to do that with the people around you. It takes a lot of vulnerability to be able to open yourself up, and it takes courage to be vulnerable. A lot of times we think like people who are vulnerable are weak, and we have to reshift that mindset, because people who are vulnerable are the strongest people, are the most courageous people, and it takes a courageous person to be vulnerable in front of another individual, especially in their moment of crisis. And so if somebody ever offers that peace, if somebody ever opens up about a vulnerable experience, know that it's taking a lot for them to open up and be that person to validate how hard they've come, how hard, let me rephrase that, how difficult validate to them that you can see the difficulty in the process, but you also see the resiliency that's being developed within them. Because resiliency is what bounces us back. It's what pushes us forward. It's what tells us, you know what, I went through this and I went through that, but I'm still going to thrive. I'm still going to succeed. I say it's resilience what makes a phoenix. It's a resiliency and courage that makes the unicorn. And when these creatures that we say don't exist exists, that's because we're making sense of something that wasn't supposed to make sense. And I'm doing that in the right way now. I'm overcoming an obstacle that I was never supposed to endure in the first place. But look at me, I'm doing it. I am that phoenix. I am that unicorn. And you empower your spirit, you empower yourselves, and by doing that, you empower everybody else around you. You get to talk to people, share your knowledge to the world about what it's like to go through this, and to support people that are going through this, and how you can not shame. And it starts by not shaming yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Taking, if you want to, like me, when I see somebody get angry and I say I want them to take a deep breath, you know what? All I can do in that moment is take a deep breath myself. If they see that I'm taking a deep breath, maybe they'll take a deep breath, maybe they won't. That has nothing to do with me. But I'm taking my deep breath. And then I won't yell at the people.
I want to ask you, has there been anything you wanted to tell someone who experienced trauma that you've never got to tell them? Or not tell them, but like, how can I word that? Let's see.
I think.
Is there something?
Well, I know that I know that I can't say, like, I don't tell people it's gonna be okay, because then I'm putting that at level of expectation. And I've seen people, I've worked with people where I've said that, and I know that things weren't okay, and things didn't turn out to be okay. And that was hard to process that, because I like to think very positively. I like to be that person that is positive, but I think sometimes we have to not be okay, and we have to be okay with not being okay, and that's the only validation that I can give a person sometimes. And I think that's sometimes the hardest kind of validation to give somebody, but it's the most important, and it's the most healing sometimes, because when you know that what's happening is not okay, and you don't feel okay, and nothing around you is okay, to be told it's okay not to be okay, it actually goes such a long way. And it makes you feel validated. Like, I've had people cry in front of me, and I never offer them tissues. They're crying and crying, and I'm never offering them tissues, because if I offer them a tissue, I'm telling them that they need to wipe away their tears, and that's not the message I want them to hear. I want them to know that their tears are actually the most expressive thing right now. There's no words that you can say that are going to say what your tears are saying. And you're going to feel better after that. I'm not going to tell you that, though. I'm not going to tell you you're going to feel better. I'm going to stand here in your pain and your sorrow, and I'm just going to be very grateful that you've invited me into the space. And that's like, there's I think that a lot of times, if there's something that I will say, that a time in my life, it was when I said something that I shouldn't have said. Like, when somebody was crying and I tried to be that source of comfort, and I wasn't quiet. I should have been quiet. I should have stayed quiet. And I definitely have those experiences too, especially with friends. It's hard to never be your friend's counselor, that's for sure. You know, I think there's reasons why, and it creates a conflict of interest. That's exactly what it is. If you try to be your friend's counselor or family member's counselor, you have a conflict of interest. You want to be the source of answers, and you can't, because there's an emotional attachment to this individual that you want them to feel good, but you don't want to see them cry. Like, no, they have to cry in order to feel good. And so I think that's why, because I understand that, a lot of people will come to me, and in those situations I found myself saying the thing that I didn't want to say, or breaking the silence when I wasn't supposed to break the silence. And I mean, I'm human, I grow, I don't claim to be, the best counselor or anything like that, hell no, but I do recognize when I've done something that I wasn't supposed to do, or when I've enabled someone and I didn't, that wasn't my intentions. And I always try to reclaim their truth, and I say, I enabled you here. You might not have recognized that I enabled you here, but that's enabling, and I don't want to do that in this situation, because it's not helpful. Or like at my last job, we were counselors. We didn't give advice. We didn't diagnose. We guided the experience. We were just there. We stood in the truth with them. We stood in rooms with them, and that was it. Like, their experience wasn't our experience, so we couldn't claim that. And I think that's, when it comes to like friends and things like that, I think sometimes the best best thing to recognize is that you don't have the right answers for this person, and so being just their source of support goes so much further than trying to say the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Cause there's times I find myself trying to support, and it's like, oh, I feel like I'm saying the wrong things right now. But yeah, I need to learn. I mean, like I said, just sitting in the room with silence, it's a big support for them as well. Um, so I mean, I would feel like that wouldn't help, but you having that experience and you letting us know that there is a big source of support. So see, like that's what I'm saying. You know, like feel like we this is a topic that we all should try to soak in, just so that in because we all have friends that have gone through things, family members that have gone through things, just neighbors that have gone through things. There's been strangers that came across us randomly and that are going through things as well, and this here you teaching me that, and everyone else was watching. Now we have that knowledge, and where we're like, okay, we can look back and be like, hey, Nano said this, and you know, I can try that out, just to be that source of support, and you know, so I appreciate you, Nano. You know, and I'm sure.
I honestly I appreciate you for wanting to talk about this, because it's not easy. It's not easy to talk about trauma, to talk about coping skills, or really to talk about the rawness of what it's like to work with individuals who are going through trauma. But it's the only time that I think that we can actually begin to plant seeds of healing. Like, putting even shifting our words, shifting our language. I think I've done shared this before about should, you know, like, should people go to counseling? No, we don't do that. Could people go to counseling? Yeah, people could go to counseling. So, like, the way we shift the language has so much to do with, but that language, the way we hear it, is going to be the way we say it. And so if we hear negative language, then we're going to say negative language. Or if we're not comfortable with silence, we're going to break the silence. So that's why when it comes to working with trauma, you have to face the uncomfortable. You have to sit with your fear. You have to sit with that scared. You have to sit with the disappointment, the sadness, the anger, the frustration, in order for you to thrive the calmness and to value the happy that comes afterwards. Because when you can recognize that the reason why you're crying is because of loss of a value, and then you start associating your value to what made you happy, then now you don't want to be happy, and that's okay. Validate that, because when you lose a loved one, you have to allow yourself to be sad, because that's the only way you're going to express how happy you were when this person was alive.
Yeah.
It's the only way to express that. And so you want to allow your body to process the emotions that it's going through, because it's going to help you cope through the pain, and you want to retell the story. And like I said, trauma doesn't have to be one fixed trauma like sexual assault or domestic violence. It can be intersections, complex trauma, like a car accident, or a car accident where you lose 5 individuals, or a car accident where nobody passes away. You still experience post-traumatic stress. Your body experiences this wave of chemicals that it stores if it doesn't release it. And if it doesn't release it through verbal processing, through healthy coping skills, through using your chakras of alignment to realign them and help your body release those toxins, like, doing those things are actually a lot more helpful for you than suppressing it. Oftentimes we think, like, if I ignore a situation, then out of sight, out of mind. It doesn't work that way, especially with trauma. Trauma, I've learned to understand that, think of it as like an onion, of course, with all these different layers that we have to peel through to get to the center of. But also, when we have the trauma happening in our present, like that's literally an open wound that's happening in our brain that we can't just wrap up with a band-aid. Can't. You can't put a band-aid on your forehead and say, okay, I'm healed from this piece of trauma. No, it doesn't work that way. And the best way I can identify that is any car accident. You can't put a band-aid over a car accident. You can't. Your body is gonna store it. It's gonna, and the way you experience that car accident is gonna shift the way you're gonna be able to heal from that. Are you gonna be able to drive in a week, or are you not gonna be able to drive for a couple of months? That's gonna change the way you responded to your trauma, and that trauma is something that you've been responding to since you were very, very small, because your trauma response is your emotional response. How we choose to respond to our emotions is how that child who wanted a lollipop at the store and threw a fit because his mom was not giving him a lollipop. Did the mom yell at the child for him to shut up? Did the mom say, are you being a little girl, you're crying? Or did the mom say, hey, you know what, I understand that you're sad because you want a lollipop. Right now, we're not going to, I'll buy you the lollipop, but we're going to eat the lollipop after we eat dinner. You want to eat some dinner and then you want to eat your lollipop? No? Okay, in that case, we're going to still eat some dinner, but we're not going to have any more lollipops right now. Maybe tomorrow we'll be able to get a lollipop, okay? That's already shifting the whole conversation. You're not yelling at the child. You're not blaming yourself for being a bad parent. You're not because your child's doing a tantrum. It's like all these different things are not happening. You're resolving the situation because you humanize the child.
Yeah.
You validate their experience. And they're learning something from you. They're learning that, hey, maybe at a store we don't yell.
Yeah.
Maybe at a store, I don't get hit at a store because that's not what happens. So, like the child is learning a lot in that moment. The way you're responding is how that child is going to learn. And like I said, discipline is to teach a child, not to punish.
Yeah, man. When you're talking about like those car accidents, I was in a car accident back in May, and it's true because when you're saying you never know if you're gonna drive the very next day or months, and stuff like that. I mean, I was able to drive the next day, and and I felt like nothing was wrong with me, until I noticed that when I was driving on the freeway again, and then the semi gets right next to me, and then I'm like, okay, kinds of thoughts keep rushing in my head. I see the semi come to my lane a little bit. I'm just like, oh dang! I slow down. I push on the brakes. I mean, it creates this memory. I mean, like a traumatic, post traumatic stress disorder. Like your PT, it just creates that, and
it's a bodily response to an experience that you have.
Yeah, and then now and I've noticed that every time I'm driving, like no matter where I'm at, no matter how fast I'm going, and it's always gonna be there, and that's why if I for like a survivor, if the way you put that perspective that in my head right now with the accident and stuff like that, that shows me that whatever they went through, I mean, it's a lot of trust. It's hard to trust people around you that you don't know, because you don't know what their intentions are, and that's why we got to understand that we can't just say you're gonna be okay, everything's gonna be fine already. Like it's happened, no worries, not gonna happen anymore, because you never know. You never know what's going in their head. Never know what's crossing as a certain person that you're passing by. You don't know what's crossing their mind and stuff like that. So
no.
Go
ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, go for it.
No, I was just saying, you never know. Like, that's why when you're saying like, oh, everything's gonna be okay, now I understand that you can't say that, because you actually don't know what's because me personally being in that accident, I thought I was gonna be fine, like like whatever, it happened. And then but now I noticed that nowadays every time I'm driving to work, or like I see that I speed right by the semi, because I don't I don't want to have so much time being right side by each other, so. But I don't know, it's crazy, man. It,
It's interesting how you say that. It's crazy because remember we were talking about the whole alien stuff. Like that's what it does. It makes us feel like we're the crazy one.
yeah,
When
yeah.
I would think that you're crazy if you weren't experiencing what you're experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
If you weren't experiencing PTSD, and that's actually something that I experienced. I shared with clients is I would be concerned if you weren't upset right now. You're apologizing because you're crying, you're apologizing because you're angry, or whatever emotion response you have. I would be concerned, and I would not be able to help or assist if you weren't feeling this way. Because now I can see that you're human. I can see that and I can help a human.
Mm-hmm.
I can validate a human. I can validate a person who is suppressing the emotion, who is suppressing what happened, who is not standing in the truth. Because, like, it's why working with people who are struggling with substance abuse. It's difficult to work with people who are working with or struggling through substance abuse simply because they're not sober. They're not in their conscious mind to say, I'm gonna promise this, but I'm not gonna follow through, because they don't have that conscious of themselves saying, I'm following through because I'm not happy or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to recognize the emotional response and how we respond to the emotion, because it's going to show us a lot. Like, there's this quote online that I see a lot that says, like, never make promises when you're happy, never make decisions when you're upset, and never lose hope when you're sad. I think something like that, something along the lines, because your emotion, when we experience certain emotions, we're not supposed to do certain behaviors, if that makes sense. Like, you don't want to be the person laughing at a funeral. You don't want to be the person crying at a celebration hysterically. You don't want to be the person who's scared when there's nothing to be scared about. So these different things that your body tells you, you want to learn how to listen to them, and you have to use your experience to learn how to navigate that. Like you, for example, in the driving situation, you don't want to speed every single time you pass a semi, but there's going to be times where you need to speed during the semi, because your body relies on that.
Yeah,
and in order for your body to survive, it has to speed through that semi. And that's a bodily response to an experience that you've had. And I think that it's great because you can recognize that happens when you're in the freeway. When it comes to any type of trauma, it's not just going to be when you're in the freeway. I mean, even when we're talking about it in a podcast, you're not in a car right now. You're speeding through the freeway, but that memory, right? Even when I say car crash or car accident or trauma in itself, PTSD, those memories will flood back.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why, like, at the beginning, I started with a trigger warning. A trigger warning, because this might not be the podcast for people to listen to if they're not ready to cope through that trauma yet, or to process that emotion yet. And that's okay. That's totally okay. It's whenever they're ready. It's whenever they want to. Whenever they stand in the truth of their journey, because they are practicing autonomy. That's whenever they want. I can't tell you, Chris, you need to slow down each time you pass that semi. No, if anything, what I can do is say, I validate that. I can see that you're anxious, and probably be that source of release, like, a validating piece. Like, hey, you know what, that I know that when I got into my car accident, it took me more than a week to drive, or not more than a week, it took me almost a week to drive. I couldn't drive right away. It took me more than a couple of days to be able to drive, and the only reason I drove was because my other friend was in a crisis, so I just got in the car without thinking twice. I just went in, and then I recognized later, oh my gosh, I actually drove. So it's the way we process our trauma is very different. It's always going to be, it's it's never going to be the same, but we can always validate that your trauma is yours and mine is mine, and that although they don't have to be the same, they affect our body even to this day.
Man, it's a lot of information.
I know. Trauma is a big topic, and we're not even touching we're still on the tip of the iceberg of the whole thing.
Yeah.
There's so much, because I think, like, especially when it comes to wanting to heal, there's a level of, so there's a cycle of self-sabotage that we talk about in counseling. That's the I blame cycle. So that cycle is, you blame so-and-so for hitting you, and now you're hurt. Well, that cycle of self-sabotage, let me see if I can find it real quick. So you blame, right? You say, look what you made me do, and then you act out and you demand. So you say something like, I demand the world go my way. So I demand that he gets punished for hitting me. And now I'm going to medicate. By self-medicating, that's going to be something like, I medicate by distressing sensual through addictions. So sometimes a lot of folks will, when they're feeling sad, they'll eat. They'll use comfort foods to help with that emotion, dopamine responsive reward system, and they'll self-medicate. They'll eat donuts, or they won't eat at all, actually. They won't, or people who struggle through substance abuse will self-medicate that way. And then the next part will be they bury. Like, they bury what's happening, they're suppressing the emotion, and they bury my feelings in the life story scripts, separating from others as separating myself and looking at others in the situation as the victim versus the villain. Mm-hmm. So there's always a bad guy and a good guy, or the bad person and the bad person. I'm sorry, the bad person and the good person. And then that I'm stuck. So I'm stuck in this situation, and I'm stuck in this problem, and then now it's your fault that I'm stuck in this problem. I can't move forward. That cycle of self-sabotage is self-sabotageable. It self-sabotages your ability to create healthy relationships, within yourself. But more importantly, it doesn't let you hold accountability or autonomy over your situation versus the cycle of success. The self-regulation cycle is a cycle of success because you yourself, you identify that you're triggered. So instead of saying, Chris, you made me angry, I say, I'm angry, Chris. Hey, Chris, I'm angry. And now I can actually start practicing what is it that I do when I'm angry. When I'm angry, I like to change my perspective, and I like to change my response. So I'll take a deep breath. Now I'll not only have I done something with my situation, I've taken accountability, and I've done some, like me, myself. Instead of saying, Chris, you need to change, I've changed. So now I'm not manipulating you with my emotion. I'm not projecting my emotion onto you. I'm simply taking accountability for my emotion, and I'm changing my state of emotion. So now I can say, like, I feel angry. And you identify. So you'll identify and name the feeling, shifting from I am angry to I feel angry. The I am angry is that you yourself, I'm angry. The I feel angry, you move side to side. Now you're buddies with your angry. You befriended the emotion versus become the emotion. And that's healthier versus becoming the emotion, because now you're not going to be destructive towards yourself. You're not going to hit the wall. You're not going to hit someone in the face. You're not going to tell someone off, and you're not going to use that language used to tell people off. Now you made that choice. So that choice is reframing from the problem and using positive intent and connecting with others. So, like, when I'm angry, I can connect with the car that cut me off, right? I'm angry at the car that cut me off. Well, I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm not going to press on my horn. I'm going to press on my brake so I can slow down a little bit. I'm not going to step on my brake. I'm going to gently take my foot off the driving lever and slightly place it over the brake, but not press on it. Slightly just stand my foot over it so that I am now being cautious. I literally use my anger for a positive thing in that moment. And that's actually a good thing, because the moment of change was, instead of pressing on the gas, I was able to release my foot from it. Even if that's the little change that you're looking at, that's change. And then the last thing is that you solve the problem. You created a win-win solution.
Yeah.
So now me, instead of honking my horn and probably pissing this guy off even more than he's already pissed off, because I already know he's mad because he honked at me.
Yeah.
So do I want to create a win-win solution or a win-lose solution or a lose-lose solution? A win-win solution is going to be me slowing down, not getting hit, and him speeding up and not getting hit. That's win-win because we're both safe. He might not be as safe as I think that he could be, but that's his risk. He gets the choice to risk his life however he chooses to. I get to risk my life however I choose to, and I'm going to choose not to risk it, and I'm going to slow down. Another thing, too, that it falls you right back into the I am triggered. So now the next time that the situation happens, you've already practiced one safe method of coping with the experience. And that's the same with any experience, whether it's happy, whether it's sad, whether it's scared, anxious, disappointed, frustrated, calm even. When you're feeling calm and you want to actually have, like, people will say, like, oh, I'm bored. You're not bored, you're probably just a little too calm. Build some excitement in your life. Don't cause chaos, don't create trouble. But know that you can actually, your sense of calmness is going to allow you to create some ideas of how to not be bored. The more calm you are, the less bored you are. And it creates a win-win solution when you befriend your calm versus try to be hyper all the time or try to create chaos all the time. Like, your emotions help with that, and the only way to recognize that is by coping through your emotions when you cope with trauma. And it's where the perspective of trauma can be seen as something that's life-threatening to life-saving. And it moves the perspective of, it shifts the perspective of, this event, this life event is my life story. Mm-hmm. And it shifts that to, this event doesn't define me. I am me, and I get to choose what that narrative is. Whether I get to tell you that, I'm a survivor of sexual assault, or I just choose to not disclose that, that's up to me, not up to you. And me getting that choice, me having that choice is my autonomy. And that allows me to shift perspectives, change relationships, and understand how I'm going to respond in those relationships. I think one thing that you mentioned is how we all know someone, and you're right. I learned that with my last job, that we provide services not just to survivors, but survivors of sexual assault, and simply because we are all affected by sexual assault. Every single one of us, because we all know somebody that might know somebody that might know somebody, and we might be that person. Mm-hmm. So really, it's important to know these skills, to understand these skills, because when someone is responding to a trigger that has happened to them, you get to be the person to have started that trigger or to help to start healing that trigger. And I think it's always better to be the person to start to heal that trigger than to re-traumatize that individual.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Let's see, where are we at on time? Oh, we're already almost... Let's see where we're at. 1:43 right now. Cool. Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, there's a lot of information still. I know there's still a lot of money we can still cover. I mean, we can probably do another to continue it. But how do you feel about the information you gave us, your skills and stuff now?
I think I feel good. If anybody has any questions, any comment, or any suggestions, and maybe you have coping skills yourself, I know we didn't dive into so many. I think one of the best coping skills that I have to give out is breathing. I know that sometimes we might not be ready to breathe, and that's okay. But there are different breathing techniques that we can use that are going to be beneficial for specific situations that we find ourselves in. And so there's like the fountain breathing method, there's the star breathing method, there's the pretzel breathing method, which is actually one of my favorite ones. Mm-hmm. And so these breathing methods are used for specific reasons. Like the pretzel breathing method, you like do this thing where you like give yourself a high five, you put your thumbs up, you twist it up an ankle, you do a jump to cross your legs, and then you with your tongue you stick it up to the roof of your mouth like that, and you breathe three times deep. You inhale and exhale 3 times very deeply. So you do it 3 times. You have to do it standing up. there's like a thing that you do. When I do it with people, the reason I do this with trauma survivors is because a lot of times when we're about to have an anxiety, your brain is not processing that emotion response quickly enough, and that deep breath, when you use a pretzel breathing technique, you're actually using both hemispheres of your brain, which means that you're using more brain energy. And when you use more brain energy, you activate more responses of your brain. So then you're moving from your stem brain to your prefrontal cortex in a more faster and a more by using your prefrontal cortex, you're able to actually shift perspective. So instead of going into an anxiety attack, you might actually understand why your anxiety is happening in the first place. And that pretzel really helps reach that more successfully versus, just trying to do the balloon method where you just go. That is not as responsive because you only use one hemisphere of your brain. When you use a pretzel, you're using both hemispheres of your brain, and for a more successful calm versus like accelerated. That makes sense. So breathing definitely goes such a long way. If you can't remember to breathe, I always say go drink some water. We're made out of more than 70% of our body is made out of water. So anytime you drink some water, you're actually trying to put a piece of yourself back into yourself. So especially when you feel lost or you feel like something a part of you was taken away, you can always reclaim it by drinking water. And that you get to choose, what fountain you want to drink out of, what kind of water you want to drink out of, whether you want to, like me, for example, I like really ice cold water. Some people don't like ice cold water. And the goal is not for them to have a specific kind of water. It's for them, right, if we're going about autonomy and empowerment, they want to have whatever kind of water that they want and validate that for them. And you remind them that they're drinking a piece of themselves. They're reclaiming a piece of themselves because they're made out of 70% water. If something was taken from them, they can actually reclaim that by drinking some water, and their body will heal that for them. It's pretty neat. A cool way to start empowering as well. And I think the last thing I'll say in terms of coping skills and coping, if you have a child and the child doesn't want to hug somebody or doesn't feel safe around somebody, let that child communicate that to you, and don't shame that child. I don't care if it's that child's grandma, if it's their godfather, however much you might trust this individual, trust the child to say that this person I don't feel safe around, because those are the building blocks to autonomy that in the future as an adult, that child will know, you know what, I have the right to say I'm not comfortable with this person touching me, or I don't want to be in this presence of this individual, I get to choose to leave. A lot of people don't recognize that they have autonomy over that, and it's because they were forced to hug people in their lives that they didn't feel they wanted to hug them, and that autonomy was stripped from them, and we had the ability to give that back to them. But now as adults, especially as adults, and if we have children ourselves, validate that for them. If they don't want to hug someone, don't let them. Don't force hugs. Don't force that. And then you start building a world where people can say no to hugs versus people building a world where people feel entitled to hugs. Nobody should feel entitled to a hug.
That's cool. That's good. I'll keep that one in mind. Yeah. But so I know, like I was saying, I know you have a lot more information you want to get out there, but we can make another like part 2 to this podcast, and then it starts, you can start noting more things down that you wanna talk about. I know it's a big subject, so but yeah, man, you guys go ahead and share this episode with whoever you think would be interested in knowing coping skills, and maybe people you think may find this information very very helpful for them. But just let them know that it's like Hanano said, it's whenever they're ready. Because like you said, sometimes it takes a lot, because a person has been through so much that it's hard to process that. They're still trying to cope with that, and but yeah, just let them know it's whenever they're ready. We're here. Nano's here for any questions you guys have. Go ahead and leave them on the comments, and Nano will go ahead and answer those. Because yeah, man. I'm sure he'll be you'll be more than happy to answer any of the questions, right, Nano?
I'd be honored to help anybody that feels like anything that I said today maybe if anything that I said today resonates with anybody, reach out to me. I like to be a source of support. I feel like I thrive more by being a source of support. And just know that I'm not going to be the person with your answers, but I can definitely help in the sense of helping you discover your own answers, because you have your answers. I think that's the most important thing to know in the world, is that you have your own answers, and sometimes we do need some help, some support to discover that for ourselves. And if anybody needs anything, I'm definitely, I make myself available to that for sure.
That's for sure. Yeah. So you guys have it, man. Like we said, we'll come up with a part 2 to this, because I know Nano wants to release some more information on that. But yeah. Once again, man, sorry for taking so long to drop more content. I mean, we've had so many days lined up, and but it, like we said, it's just work schedules, guys. But hopefully we come out with another podcast soon. I don't know what episode or what kind of topics we have coming up. I don't even know, man. But yeah, just stay tuned.
Remember, there's some good ones coming up.
Yeah.
We'll definitely think we'll ponder something.
Yeah.
For sure. And if y'all have any ideas of topics you want us to talk about, like, let us know. We can talk about like anything really, spaceships, or how to even just you yourself, how to make a spaceship. I don't know. I'm just babbling.
Yeah, we were even thinking of bringing something like a whole different vibe. Maybe something like a comedy, something funny, something different. But yeah, we'll go ahead and talk about that. See what we come up with. But if you guys come up with anything that you guys might think would be interesting, or just something you guys want to hear us talk about, it doesn't even, if we don't have any knowledge in it, we're still willing to talk about it, see what we have, some crazy answers we have, or thoughts we have on certain subjects. But yeah, man, remember, go ahead and like, comment, share. Remember, keep us trending. And to all our subscribers, even our new viewers, we appreciate your guys' support, because like we said before, you guys are our fuel. We're gonna keep giving you this content as long as we have that support, man. Because yeah, I don't know. I don't know how Nano thought about this. I don't know if he thought we would have this much episodes out.
We're number 10.
Yeah,
we're going to number 10.
Yeah. I mean, this was an idea. We just wanted to see where it led to, and I mean, it's coming out pretty successful. So I mean,
exactly.
Yeah, it's cool, man. But yeah, anything you want to say before we head out?
Yeah, I just know that I don't have. Not everything I say on here is. I speak from my experience. I speak from my truth, and if your truth and your experience is different, I validate that as well. And know that that's okay. It's okay for us to have different journeys, and for us to stand in our own truth, I think, is the most important thing. And when we are courageous enough to stand in our truth, to speak truth that not everyone can really speak of, it empowers others that are listening, that are watching. And so if you are that individual, I thank you for watching. Thanks for listening, and hope you like and subscribe. And if you have any questions or comments, you know how to reach me.
Yeah. Well, there you guys have it. um, yeah, just stay tuned, man. Um, but yeah, we'll for sure have these contents coming out a little more consistent again. Um, yeah, like you said, there you guys have it. We out. We'll see you guys soon.
De todos.
Damn, that's good.